Oh, gotta add myself to the broadcast here. Hang on, guys. Here I am. Hey there, Grateful Gang. It's Lauren Blanchard-Zaleski here. Welcome to Gratefully Living the Chronic Life. It's very good to be back. Last week we did a film screening of the film This Might Hurt, and I would love to hear what those of you that screened it, what you thought about it. I know there's a Q&A afterwards. For those of you that have joined me before, welcome back. For those of you that haven't, I do this weekly broadcast each Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is also recorded for people to view later on. And we basically talk each week about different topics pertaining to living a grateful, happy, fulfilling, joyful life while living with our chronic conditions, chronic pain, illness, and emotional pain and illness, or all of the above, depression, anxiety, things like that. We're all just trying to live happy, joyful lives. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I am an expert in myself, and I've lived with chronic pain and illness myself for over 20 years. And I know I've hit rock bottom, and I nearly let chronic pain take away my life. I hit rock bottom with alcohol 8 years ago, was lucky enough to attend a chronic pain inpatient program for 30 days. And since then, I've founded the group Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain, which many of you are probably members of. Let's see, if you want to join us, you can find us there. And I also run the blog Gratitude Addict. So it's very nice to have you all here. And we are an interactive broadcast. I've got a great guest tonight. Dr. Evan Parks is here with us tonight, and we're going to be talking about rethinking stress, how to bend and not break, under pressure is what it is. And he's got a lot of great things to share with us. I know I'm going to benefit from it because stress is a very big part of my pain story. But anyway, we are an interactive broadcast. So if you have any comments, if you want to say hi, I've got a little ticker here. Feel free to say hi, say where you're coming from. I will be putting up people's comments throughout the broadcast, and we will be taking questions if there is time. So next week, there will be no broadcast, just so you know. Not going to be here next week. So we'll meet back the following week, which I think is March. I should know this. I should have it. March, what's today? The 4th? Not next week. Well, not next Thursday, Thursday, whenever that is. We've got another couple really great broadcasts coming up, coming forward. Let me put some of those up for you so you guys can mark your calendars. Coming up, this one I just booked yesterday. She's an author and speaker, a TED Talk speaker. Her name's Amy Ostreicher. I probably brutalized her name. She's the author of an upcoming book called Creativity and Gratitude. And she has a memoir that came out last year called My Beautiful Detour, I believe. She's a pip. She's going to be a lot of fun. So that's March 25th. And April 8th, I'm thrilled to be welcoming Christy Nelson, who's the executive director of the Network for Grateful Living. She works alongside brother David Steindl Rast, who is one of my idols. And she has a new book out called Wake Up Grateful. And this one's really exciting. April 29th, we have Dan Millman, who is an author of many, many books, but his most famous one is Way of the Peaceful Warrior. So mark your calendars for those, and we'll have other broadcasts in between, but those are some big ones we have coming up. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, and he's right here, Dr. Evan Parks. Hi, Evan.
Hello, Lauren. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. He was originally scheduled to be with us back in February, and I had to cancel the broadcast last minute because I was not feeling well at all. He was very understanding and has agreed to come back and share his gifts and advice with us today. So thank you very much. The way I found him is the way I find a lot of my guests is I stalked him. I have a Google alert set up on my email that anytime somebody mentions gratitude and chronic pain in an article, I get an alert. And I actually don't get many alerts from that, but your article, he wrote an article back in January for Psychology Today, which I have here to share, called 5 Surprising Ways Gratitude Improves Your Health. And I'm like, I have to talk to this guy. So I emailed him after reading the article. I mean, I've got the article here. I'm going to embarrass you here, Evan.
Okay.
The end of the article says, plant the seeds of gratitude. Think of gratitude as a garden you plant. When you start incorporating gratitude practices into your activities of daily living, at first you won't see any immediate change in your outlook on life. Lasting improvements in your emotional and physical health take time, but they will come if you are diligent. In fact, setting the intention to plant a gratitude garden in and of itself speaks to your capacity for hope and a more fulfilled life. And when the fruits of gratitude do show up, it will have been well worth the effort.
Mm.
That's when I knew I had to contact you, because that is so much what we work on in attitude of gratitude with chronic pain. So before we get to you talk, let me read your bio. I'll embarrass you a little bit more. And then you can tell us what you offer for your clients. Evan Parks, Psych D, spent 15 years working in crisis situations, helping children and adults in crisis throughout Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, and the former Soviet states. That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it was.
He's the author of the book Chronic Pain Rehabilitation, Active Pain Management to Help You Get Back to the Life You Love. He serves as an adjunct assistant professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine in the Division of Rehabilitation Medicine, and is on staff at Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation Hospital. He's also a contributor to Psychology Today, writing a blog on pain rehabilitation. So again, thank you for being with us. I'm so excited you're here to talk to us.
You are so welcome.
So why don't, before you get started talking about rethinking stress, why don't you tell us, outside of your bio, what it is that you do exactly?
I do a couple things. The main work that I do is at Mary Free Bed Rehabilitation Hospital. It's in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And a rehabilitation hospital is primarily known for its inpatient program. And we see about 70% of the car accident victims in Michigan that need long-term rehabilitation care. But the work that I do is in one of the outpatient clinics, and we have a 10-week specialized program that is designed to be a multidisciplinary team that walks people through a rehabilitation program and helps people who have had chronic pain for years and years to be able to get back on their feet and leave behind all of the pain management clinics and treatments and things that they've gone to before. What we consider a successful program is when somebody never has to come back again to see us. And that is in sharp contrast to a lot of the pain management approaches that are out there that we call interventionist programs, where people are basically getting medications and shots and surgeries and stimulator devices and all kinds of things to try to basically manage the symptoms. And our approach is really to help that nervous system to be less reactive so that a person can function much better without the chronic pain. So that's the main work that I do. And on the side, I am doing some coaching. I love walking people through just life change process and the struggles that we have. And that's actually what has me interested in talking about stress at this point in our life. Because all across your listening audience, there are people who are under pressure right now, probably much more pressure than they might have been, in years past, just because of all the different things that are happening around the world right now.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, for me, stress is, I was telling you earlier before the broadcast, for my pain, I don't usually see a pattern with weather or anything like that. The only thing I can tell you for sure is that stress definitely exacerbates my pain, and
Right.
often in a very big way. So relearning and rethinking stress is something I'm very, very interested in.
Yes.
So how did you get involved with rethinking stress? How did you start learning and teaching that?
Well, I through the hard road of being under stress. That's the best place to learn, I think, is through the lessons that we get from life. Didn't learn this from a book. So the work that I did for a number of years, Lauren, was actually overseas. I lived in Budapest, Hungary, for 15 years. And while I was living there, I was traveling throughout all that side of the world. I was traveling throughout Eastern Europe, Central Asia, the Middle East, all the former Soviet states that are in that region, and intervening in crisis situations. I was helping humanitarian workers. I was helping Christian mission organizations. I was helping people who were doing all kinds of NGO work that were establishing projects in other countries. And they would obviously be under stress, not only from the living conditions that they were under, but because of the corruption, crime, and violence that they were often in the midst of trying to establish works that would improve those areas. So I'd be going into situations where many stressful things had been happening to an individual or to a team, and then I'd try to assess how to help those people and whether or not they could be helped right there where they were still at or needed to be removed or sent to another place in order for recovery to take place. But
wow, that sounds stressful.
Yeah, that was stressful. Yeah, it really was.
I bet. And how did they take to it all when you were helping them?
Yeah, well, people are appreciative of help. So I always found people quite, encouraged to have somebody, show up on site, recognize, the situation that they're in and get an appreciation of the context that they're living, and the challenges that they have. But, truly, I found it challenging work. How do you help people thrive when the reality is they're not going to get out from under the pressure that they're in?
Right. And that's kind of like us with chronic pain too. Chances are, it would be nice if we get out of our chronic pain, but
right,
that may not happen. So we have to try to learn to thrive while still having it, right? It's kind of similar to that.
That is exactly it, Lauren.
Yeah.
You clear, yeah, because that pressure that's there is going to stay there in many of these circumstances. So in that context, how do we look at that? How do we respond? How do we not let that pressure be something that ends up compromising our emotional health and our physical health? And so in the midst of all of that, when I said, I learned the hard way, I experienced quite a bit of stress myself. The situations that I was in, the traveling that I was doing, the complexity of the situations, that really began to wear on me personally. I ended up realizing that, well, I'm pretty much like a one-man fire station. And there wasn't another one of me out there doing that work. So, I was getting calls all the time.
I bet.
So I had to, take stock of, wow, this stress is impacting me. I'm going to be, in the same condition, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as the people that, I was wanting to help. And I had to realize it's like, no, I have to take stock of what's happening. I have to respond to this differently. I have to change the mindset that I have. I have to change how I'm going about my life. And that's what I hope to, talk about with you today.
Well, why don't you tell us, how do we go about doing that? Where do we get started?
Well, we're going to get looking at what a definition of stress is. All right. We're going to start with that. And if you could just go back one slide there.
Oh man, I had this all set up. There we go.
Perfect. That's all we needed.
Okay.
So, Lauren, this comes from over 100 years ago. Okay. This is a definition that was started at the time that they were just beginning to look at what stress was. So the term, interestingly, comes actually from physics and from engineering. Walter Cannon was a man who was also researching stress, and he used the word in order to kind of recognize that what he was sawing, what he saw happening was pressure. And so in physics and engineering, when you have a piece of wood or metal and you want to test its strength, you put it under pressure. And that's what the word in physics and engineering was stress. You put something under stress. So he borrowed that word and it started to apply it to our understanding today of what we think of stress as pressure. So the definition that Hans Selye, who's Hungarian, by the way, came up with is this statement: stress is the response of the body to any demand that's placed on it. So you have to understand what his research was. His research was with rats, and he could easily produce tumors in the rats, ulcers in the rats, depression in the rats, simply by putting them under a difficult situation.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so it might be that the rats were cold, or they were hungry, or they were made to fight, or they had to swim in water for hours or something like that. But it didn't matter what he did, that he could produce these physical responses in the rats. And so what he thought was causing the breakdown of the physical body of these animals was the fight or flight response. So when we're under pressure, we have this automatic protective system that kicks in called the fight or flight response.
Right.
And, it increases blood pressure, increases heart rate, increases our breathing, increases adrenaline, cortisol, blood sugar increases, pancreas starts to shut down, turns off insulin, blood circulation leaves our hands, leaves our feet, goes to the core of our body, muscle tension increases, our mouth becomes dry. Lots of things are happening. And so he thought that was the mechanism that was leading to this breakdown of the body. So from this definition, and we're going to come up with another one here in a minute, but from this definition, we get this idea that stress can kill you. Stress is negative. And that's where we're going to jump here to the second slide. The idea that stress is harmful is actually kind of like a carryover from our thinking that if you picture our stress response, let's say 10,000 years ago, we're living on the savannah and we're getting chased by a lion, and we have this massive fight or flight response, and it's helpful. It gets us out of danger. It gets us to turn and face the lion. It gets us, to hide somewhere. But our flight or flight response today, it's triggered by an email. It's triggered by, sitting in traffic and being late for 5 minutes for your dentist appointment.
You're right.
It gets triggered by a conversation that we have, or anticipating the conversation that we're going to have. And so what researchers and scientists looking at stress have thought for a number of years is that our stress response is somehow, in our day and age, maladaptive. And that's what we're going to rethink, because I was looking, when I was realizing that I was under stress, I looked at my stress response as somehow detrimental to me. And so this is the threat mindset, that we picture that stress is depleting us of health and vitality. It's interfering with our life, and it has lots of negative consequences. And, there's a side of that, there's some relevance to it. But we're going to now look at, well, it's not quite that simple. And I'll give you a little bit of research that typically tips the balance in terms of this threat mindset. If you get to the next slide there. So here's what we often hear when we hear about stress reported in the news. All right. So in 2008, there was obviously a huge financial crisis,
Right.
and impacted everybody around the world. And so researchers immediately went into this UBS bank, big international bank, and they found that 100% of the bankers that they were looking at had symptoms of depression or anxiety or insomnia. They had alcohol problems. And they said, well, yeah, looks like stress, causes these. This is just like Hans Selye in the rats.
Which is what you hear all the time on the news and everything, basically, is that
Right.
stress causes all these bad things, right?
Right. Right, exactly. And another study was done over 8 years, and it had 30,000 people. And they realized that when a person had a significant level of stress in the past year, they had a 43% increased likelihood risk of death
Hmm.
from what they attributed. They thought it was from the stress. So we're going to jump now to another definition of stress, and we're going to start looking at stress maybe a little bit differently.
Okay.
All right. So here's another definition of stress. So stress is what arises when something you care about is at stake.
Oh,
Now,
that's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
What do you find like that grabs you about this definition?
I never thought about it like that. I just thought of stress as a negative, something negative that was happening to me, but I didn't delve further into why.
Right.
Seeing that definition now, it's because something I care about is at stake,
Right.
whether it's my well-being, my family's well-being, my
Right.
health, something like that. So yeah, I had never thought about it deeply like that. That's super interesting.
Yeah. And embedded in this definition is this idea is that stress is actually showing up to help us. So our stress response, rather than being something that's working against us, is working for us. It's there to mobilize us.
Okay.
So let's just think about the last few minutes as you and I started our program.
Okay.
So if you would have hooked us up to my biofeedback equipment, you would have recognized that we both had an increase in heart rate, increase in blood pressure, increase in breathing. You know, that stress response is normal,
Right.
and it's there actually to help us, to be energetic, to convey information that we care about, to connect with our audience. That's why
Right.
that's there.
That's why I meditate a couple minutes before each broadcast so I can not have so much of the bad stress, I guess, right?
Yeah,
I guess the
right.
good stress is good from
It
what you're
is
telling
good.
me. Yeah.
It is good. So I have a nice little illustration here. So picture uh, a skydiving instructor and a skydiving student out for the very first time.
Okay.
They're 5,000 feet in the air, and the sliding door on the side of the plane opens up, and it's a jump. So what's the difference between the stress response of the skydiving instructor and the student? Nothing. They're exactly the same. So let's look at the next slide, and we're going to see what makes the difference between the skydiving instructor and the skydiving student. Well, the skydiving instructor looks at that experience and says, this is awesome. That they still have the same physical response, right? But they look at their response as a sign of preparation, as a sign of helping them be physically more agile, stronger, more alert. They realize that stress response is going to help them perform better, that they're going to be more adaptive, better reflexes. That new student, they're back in that threat response, that mindset. They're like, this is terrible. What have I decided to do? And so what we're going to see is this kind of growth mindset, when that is kind of dominating our thinking when we're under pressure, it actually changes our body. It changes our chemistry. It changes how our nervous system works, how our immune system works. Just this mindset. So let's jump to the next study.
Okay. For anybody that has any questions for Dr. Parks, please feel free to comment. We'll get to them as soon as we can. All right.
So these are the same two studies that I just mentioned. The first one with group 1 and group 2, has to do with this study that I mentioned of 30,000 people looked at over 8 years. And yes, they did find that when somebody had increased levels of stress in the past year, that they had a 43% increased risk of dying. But the researchers asked a very important set of questions. They asked the question, do you believe that stress is bad for you? And the people who said yes are the people who died.
Oh my gosh.
The people who said, no, I do not believe that stress is harmful for me, did not.
Interesting.
It is fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating. So we're going to look at, well, how does the body do this? Do our beliefs really, truly impact this much of our physical health, our mental health? Yes, it does. So they actually went into those bankers' environment at the UBS bank, and they taught these people the growth mindset. They said, you're under pressure. You're not going to get out from under it. How can you look at the situation that you're in and your stress response differently? And they began to coach them on the growth mindset. And as soon as they did that, they saw a reduction in depression, anxiety, insomnia, and alcohol problems.
Wow.
So it was not the environment that was causing the reaction. It was the perception of the environment that was causing the reaction.
Right. That makes sense.
So this is mind-blowing for me. All right. So many, many years, as I was working with people, coaching people, teaching, I was teaching the threat mindset. I was saying stress is going to kill you.
Yeah, right.
And it was killing me, and I really needed to have this mindset shift and realize it's like the way that I'm thinking about this itself is fundamentally wrong. So what's exciting about this is our body changes. So let's go into a story. And
Okay.
I liked your question about like how does this actually happen? So we're thinking about beliefs, and we're thinking about how do beliefs impact our mind and our body. So there was a researcher from University of Columbia, or Columbia University, who was interested in the stress that hotel housekeeping staff were under. The housekeeping staff viewed their work as very stressful. They viewed themselves as out of shape, and they felt exhausted and drained from their work, so that when they got home from work, they never felt like they could maintain their health or exercise. All right.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds normal.
Yeah, it does.
So this researcher, she developed a poster that described the physical activities that they're doing as housekeeping people, picking up things from off the floor, vacuuming, stacking things high, and equated them visually on this poster to normal exercises that a person might do. So that was one poster. The other poster was exactly the same, but it had this little statement at the bottom. Well, it was easy to read. And it said, the amount of activity that you do during the day exceeds the U.S. Surgeon General's recommendations for daily exercise.
Oh, wow.
All right. So half the hotels got the poster with just the pictures and the, examples. The other half, the hotels, got this one with the statement added. Your activity exceeds the U.S. Surgeon General's recommended daily recommendation for exercise.
Okay.
So she came back 1 month later. And in 1 month later, the group that had that message at the bottom, they had lost weight. They had lost body fat. They had reported increased job satisfaction.
Really?
And they had made no changes in their life outside of work. They had increased energy. The only thing that was different was the belief that what they were doing was actually beneficial to them. That's all.
Wow, that's fascinating. That really is fascinating. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can help a lot of people. If you think of all the industries, all the workplaces, all the daily mundane things that we do at our home, even. Oh, it's drudgery.
Yep.
Well,
living with chronic pain is stressful in and of itself,
right.
Every aspect of it, let's face it, every aspect of it, what the future holds, what am I going to feel like today? What if I can't get my medication filled on time? There's so much stress involved with everybody's lives.
Yep.
People with chronic pain and illness for sure. So being able to rethink all that would really benefit us, it sounds like.
Yeah, it can. So the next slide, I'm just going to get into a little bit of what happens with our body.
Okay.
So we all know that adrenaline is released with stress. Cortisol is released with stress. Cortisol is something that actually suppresses the immune system.
Right.
And it has all kinds of other implications that, are pretty significant. But what I'm going to focus on are things that are less advertised, less talked about, but equally as significant. So oxytocin is a wonderful neurotransmitter that's in our brain that we call the cuddle hormone. And
cuddle hormone, like cuddling?
Cuddle hormone, because if you hug somebody for more than 6 seconds, you start to produce oxytocin.
We were talking about this in the group yesterday. We all miss hugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't wait to hug everybody again.
We miss our daily dose of oxytocin because of it. So what happens, though, when oxytocin is released under stress, it is actually prompting us to seek out social support. So think back about the times that you've been under stress. One of our mindsets is, oh, I'm under stress, I'm going to pull back from people. Our brain is pushing us toward people. It's pushing us to tell our story, to connect socially, to connect emotionally with people. The oxytocin actually helps repair damage to the heart when it's released under stress.
Really?
It does.
Wow.
Serotonin, we often, associate with levels being related to depression, things like that. Well, serotonin is released under stress, and what it does is it helps us attune to others, to be more attentive to reading and understanding, empathizing with others. And it helps us regulate ourselves as well. Dopamine, basically, I think of it like a courage neurotransmitter. It helps us to be optimistic. It helps us to actually be like that, skydiving instructor and feel rewarded for taking a risk. Helps us to take action. And there's another neurotransmitter that actually helps with brain growth and wound repair. So when we're under stress, there's a lot of good things that are happening to protect us and to get us connected and to heal us.
But we don't know it.
We don't talk about it.
Now we do.
Yeah. So these are some of the things that are actually happening.
I have to say, I'm looking at this, and this is going to sound awfully salesy, although I don't make any money, so it's not really salesy. But I'm looking at these things, and I'm thinking, this is all what attitude of gratitude with chronic pain is about. Oxytocin having
Yeah.
community. I started the group because before I got better 8 years ago and was in pain rehab, I retreated. I've always been a very social person, and I just didn't want to talk to anybody anymore because I was so in such a dark place, and I just didn't want to socialize at all. And I learned in my pain program that speaking to others and having that sense of community is really important. The serotonin, the empathy, this is what we do best in AOG. Dopamine, optimism, reward, action. It all sounds very similar to what we work on every day in our group.
Yes.
And what this broadcast is about too, just helping everybody to get through the hard times as best we can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the emphasis of your group and what you've done, because we need that kind of synergy that comes from, coming together with others who have a like mind, who want to see the good. And it doesn't mean that the bad doesn't exist, but the good is stronger, more powerful.
Amazed. These people are all in pain and they join us. We've got 5,700 members now that they just encourage each other, and it really is. I'm just amazed by them every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're a member of it too.
Yes, I am. I love the encouragement that I read and hear on your programs and posts and things. So one of the first steps to take, Lauren, is to manage stress more effectively. And this is what I had to do, is I had to realize that I was caught up in the threat mindset. I think we all are. That's not a admission of defeat. I think that's just the reality. I mean, pretty much all the news articles that you see and hear are focusing on, oh, this is bad for us. So our management style when we're in the threat mindset is to try to get rid of the stress, avoid stressful situations. And we often, unfortunately, turn to things for stress management that bring their own problems, distraction, food, alcohol, medications, drugs. So those
eventually cause more stress, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And other health complications.
Right.
And we withdraw socially. And what really impacts the pain component is we reduce activity. We reduce activity, we are setting ourselves up to have flare-ups in pain. That is a whole nother story, a whole nother webinar. but that's the pain cycle.
It is. I know that one very well too.
Yeah, right. And so let's look at the growth mindset. How does the growth mindset help us manage stress a little bit differently? Well, the growth mindset works like this. We want to, number one, recognize that our stress response is normal, that there's nothing wrong with our increased heart rate or increased blood pressure. It's preparing us for action. And we have to channel that action into activity. When we're paralyzed by stress, when we shut down because of stress, we're going against what our body is asking us to do. It's asking us to take action. It's asking us to do something that's significant and important. Here's a interesting little parallel from the animal world. If you think about lions and, let's say, zebras on the Serengeti, those poor zebras get chased every day.
Right.
On the plains. They go to get a drink of water. What's waiting for them there?
Right.
Zebras don't get ulcers. Zebras don't have headaches. They don't have insomnia. They go to sleep every night.
Why? Why do they not have that?
Because they are thankful, they're grateful. They're zebras that practice gratitude for their fight and flight response.
Of course, it's gratitude. Of course it is. I love it.
Yes. And they recognize that fight or flight response saves them. And we want to be the same. We want to look at our stress response as something that is actually helping us. Secondly, we have to realize that we are in significant need of social support. Now, this is a problem under our COVID
Right.
pandemic that we're in right now. And we have to then be creative. Your group is a place for people to safely socially connect. But go beyond just reading a post or liking a post. Look for people who you think just might be a good listening ear, that you think maybe have a similar life circumstance, or better yet, somebody that you think you might even be able to encourage that might be in a greater struggle than you're in.
Yep, absolutely.
We have to connect with people in order, so one of the things that the zebras have is community. They talk about those lions that almost got them that day.
I love it. We offer live chats every Tuesday and Wednesday on Zoom for anybody in our group to join. It's called Flush the Format. And we do have some really lively conversations during those hours. And it's just another way to get to know people better and have another sense of community. But the friendships that are made too, just from people who they know, you kind of understand, even if we don't know each other's exact ailments or whatever. In the live chats, we talk about it, but in the group, we don't. But just the fact that they understand what we live with, just having that understanding makes you go even so much further with your sense of socialism or socialization, not socialism. Yeah. Socialization and community and love. It's beautiful.
Yes. Yep. So that is the element I think that is often missing, and that was missing in my life. So being a one-man fire department, I wasn't reaching out to people.
Okay.
I wasn't sharing my burdens. I wasn't, processing, debriefing. I was debriefing everybody else.
Right.
Right. And I wasn't doing what I was asking other people to do and providing to other people.
Right.
I needed that. So the last point there, it says, look for opportunities to use your character strengths. So I'm going to dive into this one here just for a minute.
Okay.
So think of your values, what's important to you, and your character strengths, these qualities that you have that help you move in the direction of your values. So let's say that working with refugees is an important value of yours. Your character strengths come along and say, okay, you have the character strength of empathy, you have the character strength of perseverance, you have the character strength of encouragement, social intelligence. You're going to use those character strengths to help you move in the direction of your values. So our character strengths and our values are like two strong horses that can pull us forward through difficult time. And when we realize that we have these strengths and that we're not left without any resources to deal with something, we have a powerful resource. So I'll give you a couple studies. One has to do with how people responded after on ground zero after 9/11 and hurricanes like Hurricane Hugo down in Florida. So ground zero, obviously there's many, many people impacted. And so researchers went in and looked at depression, PTSD rates. But they realized that even though there are lots of people at ground zero, not everybody was developing PTSD and depression. After hurricanes or after that disaster of 9/11.
Right.
And what they found is that when individuals engaged in helping behaviors, that even though they didn't have hardly anything, but they used whatever means they could to help others and focus on others, might have been just listening, or it might have been money, it might have been time, it might have been providing something. When they did that, it protected them from developing PTSD and depression.
I believe that. It takes you outside of yourself and your own issues, doesn't it?
It does.
When you're offering something to others, no matter how small. It can
Right.
be liking a post from somebody, or
Right.
writing somebody a note, something like that. But any little thing like that
Yes.
really helps. Yeah.
Right. And so if you imagine this as an ongoing stressful situation, looking at the caregivers of individuals who have Alzheimer's, so people develop quite a bit of stress being a caregiver of somebody who is in physical or mental decline.
Right.
They often don't have relief. There isn't like a day off that they get.
Right.
So in order to help those individuals, what they did is they wanted to help kind of promote the growth mindset. And what they encourage them to do at the end of every day is to write down in a journal one lesson that they learned in life from the work that they were doing. And then they came back time period later and found that these people had less depression, less anxiety, fewer sleep problems, better overall health. I mean, all of these things had changed. And what they were helping them realize is that even though their situation obviously was not good, there was something very positive that was coming out of that situation. It didn't make that situation good, like I said, and it didn't make it, that's the reason that situation was happening. But even when we're in bad situations, we can find in ourselves strength that we did not know that we had.
Yes.
So it helped these people identify character strengths. It helped them change their perspective on life. It helped them have a deeper sense of spirituality, a greater connection with God. And they began to see the situation that they were in differently, which changed their brain, which changed their immune system, which changed their body.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Absolutely fascinating. This is mind-blowing to me.
I am so encouraged, to be applying this to my life. And if you can apply,
if it works for you, it's going to work for us. So
yeah, well, life right now is challenging for all of us in many different ways. We're all, I'm assuming many of us are separated from family members that we care about.
Right.
We're separated, from opportunities that we otherwise would have. You think of the students who miss educational opportunities,
Right.
the young career people who are like, yeah, I can't get a job.
Yeah.
I mean, this has put a pause button on life.
It has.
And, it is going to force us to be resilient. It's going to force us to be creative. It's going to force us to like, all right, this wasn't my plan. I better develop another one. But I think this growth mindset is going to be super helpful for people if they can grab onto it and say, yes, I can rise up and face the challenges that I have. So I'll give a little summary here, Lauren,
Sure.
with the next slide.
It's all about being willing and being adaptable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
What do you have to lose?
Right. So here are some of the takeaways that I think are helpful. Number one, when we see our fight or flight response happening, we want to challenge ourselves to say, okay, how can I turn this kind of adversive moment in my life into excite and delight? How can I take action? How can I get ready? How, what can I put this energy toward? And even if it's a small thing, cleaning your house or something like that, but put it into action. So I always encourage people, if they can't find a specific way to attack a problem, to start solving a problem. If it's financial stress, the very basic thing that we need to do is develop a budget. We have to have that. So, but if you can't find that activity to do that is directed toward the problem immediately, the minimum that we should do is to move, is to physically get active, because our body's being prepared for action, and it's best if we take action somehow, even if it's going for a walk, to put that charge into a direction physically. We have to turn our withdrawal tendencies to pull back from people into taking care of friendships, that's tending, and befriending, reaching out to people that we know need friendship.
Right.
And those people surround us. I like to be as aware and open as I can when I'm in a grocery store, looking around to the people who are near me. And I'll make conversations with absolute strangers. And I've had the most wonderful conversations with people that I never knew before.
Oh, I bet they love you.
Well, people need connection.
We do.
And for many of the older folks that we, see in our grocery stores, I mean, they very well may be living alone.
That's right.
And maybe you
have a chance to make their day by starting a conversation with them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's beautiful.
And then we want to turn our avoidance of stress into acceptance, which you mentioned. We need to accept what we cannot control, and we need to connect with our values, connect with our character strengths, remind ourselves of, hey, what really is important here? How do I rely on some of the strengths that I have, the character strengths that I have, the beliefs that I have, to give me this bigger picture of what life is all about? It's more than just this moment that I'm in right now.
It sounds fantastic. I can't imagine it happens overnight. There must be steps that you have to go through. I guess like little steps, like you say, if you can't be proactive, like you said, in making a budget, for instance,
right,
get out and move, do something just a little bit active just to get it out of you. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So what if something happens tomorrow that's extremely stressful? What would you recommend for people to get out of it? Where do we start?
Where do we start?
Yeah.
Well, we have to start with recognizing that our response to it that we feel, which is overwhelmed. We have individually, we might experience the stress differently. I know how I feel it. But we have to realize that stress response in itself is not damaging. Okay. It's helpful.
So we're not in danger. We can tell
we're
ourselves
not in danger.
Not in danger. Okay.
We're not in danger. We want to use that fight or flight response to put it into action. We have to look at what can I do? Is there something proactive that I can do? Is there something that I can learn? Is there a problem that I can solve? Is there a person that I can talk to? And we also need to bring people into the picture to stand with us, to be a witness, to the experience that we're going through, that we can share what we're, struggling with another person, that they can reflect back to us what it is we're saying, which might not be quite helpful. And we get that feedback. It's like, well, you might not want to do that.
So establishing those connections that you talked about is super important.
It sure is.
Yeah.
It sure is. And a
lot of people that live with chronic illness have lost a lot of people too. Maybe they've lost friends.
Yes.
For whatever various reasons or whatever. A lot of people are alone. So finding those connections in any way you can find them is very important.
Yeah, yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
It's so important for us to befriend and to take care of our friendships, to maintain them. Even if it's just writing an old-fashioned letter to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of you."
We do that in the group. We have a club called Happy Mail, and we send actual snail mail letters to anybody that
I
signs up.
Neat. That
Yeah.
is perfect.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a very mindful activity, I always say, because when you're writing a letter to somebody, you're only thinking of that person.
Yep.
And when you receive a letter like that, you feel like a rock star because you know that person was just thinking of you. It
Yes.
really is very special.
Yep.
I love that. So
Yep.
for those of you who are watching, if you want to comment in with how stress has affected your life, what Dr. Parks has just shared with us, how you can apply that to your life, we'd love to hear from you. This is all, it really is just so mind-blowing to me. I really need to process it all. I know I saw your slides ahead of time, but I must admit I read through them, but I didn't take time to think about them much. And having you explain them all to me just really has my mind just mind blown.
Great.
I never thought about zebras not having ulcers and headaches before, but of course they don't. And I spend a lot of time trying to deal with not having stress in my life because I know how it affects me. Mm-hmm. So I do the mindfulness meditation and things like that. And I try to stay connected and all that, but I'm not very good at keeping stress. I'm a work in progress. I'm a very imperfect human being, but I'm willing and able to try to learn. And you sure have taught me that today.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful.
So we had a couple comments here. I saw Denise Gorgie said, "This is exactly what I've been doing. Isolating, no socializing, and not reaching out for support that I greatly need. Wow, I need to work on these things." Thanks, Denise. And she also said, "Mind blown from this slide and its explanation. Love this." I love it too. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Before we let Dr. Park go, I just want to share with you his website is painrehabsource.com. And actually I have his website up that we can show quickly here. Yeah. And here's his book, Chronic Pain Rehabilitation, which you can get where, on Amazon?
Yes.
Great. And you also have a Facebook page, and you host the Pain Rehab Podcast. Is that on weekly?
I haven't come up with a consistent schedule. So what I'm actually doing is using some of the exercises that I have been using with patients every day. I'm putting those exercises, mindfulness exercises, into the podcast. And now what I'm doing is taking each segment of the book and explaining it in little 10-minute sections. So I can basically walk through the entire content of the book into the podcast. And
that's a great idea.
Yeah. Not all pain people are able to sit and read through a book, and I want to get that information out in the simplest form possible.
That's a great idea. That's a really great idea. A lot of us use audiobooks a lot, so what you're suggesting is really great. Yeah. This was extremely helpful. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of thanks from our viewers. So thank you so much. Much appreciated. For those who can't do much physical movement, any suggestions for disputing that energy?
Yeah, that there are many people who aren't able to put that energy into physical action. So in that situation, what you want to do is breathing exercises. There are a couple different breathing exercises. The most typical that I start people off is diaphragmatic breathing. It's a breath where you breathe in slowly through your nose on a count of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Slowly out of your mouth with pursed lips on a count of 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then a little bit of pause, 1, 2 on an empty breath. And that slows your breathing rate down from what our average breathing rate is, which is 12 breaths per minute, to about 6 breaths per minute. And that actually helps slow down and turn off that stress response.
Fantastic. Great advice. Again, let me put his website up again for you. painrehabsource.com. And Pain Rehab Source on Facebook as well. Am I right about that? Your Facebook page? Great. Thank you, Dr. Evan Parks. Thank you so much for this incredible information. I can't wait to apply it. I hope it's helped all of you. And again, we will have no broadcast next week, but I will see you the week after, whatever that date is. I should have been more prepared. Thanks, gang. Thanks, Dr. Parks.
Thank you.
And I have a really cool ending if I can find it. Here it is.